You're listening to the Two Tongues Podcast. And now your hosts, Kyle and Chris.
Buongiorno. Hold on, you guys. We're having a slight technical difficulty. Somehow my
the backup audio,
my trusty piece of software here, and now we're recording.
We're recording
Officially.
the just in case audio.
Yeah, we need that. I mean, I've been needing that, man.
Yeah.
You just got to clip a snippet of this software here, DaVinci, that I recently downloaded to replace whatever free software I was using for video editing. And I do very little video editing. I don't know at all what I'm doing, and I just stumble through it like a blind. What's the expression?
A blind mouse.
Like a blind mouse.
Like Mr. Magoo.
Trying to fly a spaceship.
Mr. fucking Magoo over here.
But anyway, there are many times where the audio will be missing from the video, and I'll have to go in and figure out how to take my backup audio and
jam it in
there.
Yeah.
I'm sure if anybody just showed me, it would be far easier. But instead, I'm just trying to figure all that out.
Yeah.
But I figured it out.
Feeling around like Blinken.
Like Blinken.
You don't remember Blinken?
I'm trying to remember Blinken. It reminds me of, hold on.
Hey, Blinken.
It reminds me of, that's Chappelle.
Yeah.
And the movie would be, Robin
Hood. Men in Tights.
Men in Tights. That's the one. Yes. Damn. I would have come up with it eventually.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a memorable one, you know?
Oh, for sure.
It's a great movie.
It holds up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, Office Space.
Mel Brooks.
Holds up.
Yeah, Office Space is great.
So Kyle, my neighbor right next door,
Mm-hmm.
she has this large, strange-looking rock in her garden.
Okay.
And the other day, I'm up in my bedroom. I look out the window, and I see her in the yard. She's wearing pumps and a skirt and a blouse, and she has a fucking sledgehammer, and she's hitting this rock in her yard. And yeah, that expression on your face is exactly what I thought.
That neighbor.
Where are we?
That neighbor.
The neighbor that lives in the log cabin.
Yeah. Okay.
House. So I went over there. I was like, what the hell are you doing? And anyway, so she explains to me that the rock is there's a word she used for it.
It's a meteorite.
Concretion, I think she said.
Oh. It's a stalactite.
It's a fossil containing rock.
Okay.
And they have this weird patina on them, and you can find them in Lake Erie. And this was found in Lake Erie. And somebody with a backhoe went and got off the beach and took it up to her garden because her whole intention was to break it open and see if there's a fossil in there, because often there is in these rocks.
When you said like pumps and stuff, I'm imagining like somebody dressed like a sex worker.
No.
Okay. So that's where my mind, that was like the face. I mean, it is still, you don't see a lady in a dress and whatnot swinging a sledgehammer at a rock all that often. But
you don't.
When you said pumps and a skirt, like my mind went I thought this was going to be like a much different story.
No, this is just a middle-aged lady in nice clothes outside swinging a hammer at a rock. And it seemed strange.
Yeah, that does seem strange.
Meanwhile, I spent like 45 minutes today out there beating on a rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys find any dinosaurs?
Not yet. It's a real chore breaking into that rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. We made some progress, but
it's just really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. And I don't have any of the right tools. So we're swinging a sledgehammer at a rock. So I went and grabbed my my hatchet, because the back of the hatchet is a really good hammer. And I took a crowbar, a small crowbar, and I went out there and I was beating on it with a crowbar, and I was like chipping away at the edges and making some progress. And then I ordered a chisel off Amazon, like a real chisel. I'm gonna get into this goddamn rock.
You're like you're doing your Flint Dibble. You gotta get some sleeves.
I'm out there dibbling. Yeah, I need to get some big old sleeves.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
How did this lady find out that this was a dinosaur rock?
Apparently she knows. Apparently
she knows rocks.
It's like a hobby of hers.
I like rocks.
No, there was like a bucket at the neighbor's house, because the neighbor on the other side is her brother. So I live in between brother and sister, and a big old tub of rocks, and I was out there looking at them, and they were all fossils that she'd found over the years. So apparently she's into that thing, that kind of thing.
She's a fossil collector.
Apparently. And
what kind of fossils has she got?
It was all like aquatic, like shells, seahorses, shells. Yeah, it was mostly like shells and coral and like different shit.
Seahorse, seashell.
Seahorse, seashell party.
Not my chair, not my problem. Does anybody know what that is? If you do know what that is, comment and let us know. Because that's like
that reference.
That's nostalgic for me. That video.
Yeah.
Not my chair, not my problem.
I'm trying to think of other lines from it.
Oh man, it's a good one. Mr. Balloon Hands. Look at this guy. He's Mr. Walkway. Mr. Walk down me, I'm a walkway. Lead me to the building. Fuck you. Yeah. It's a good one.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic of old obscure internet videos, there was like a bunch that I remembered from high school. So we're talking like early 2000s, in the early days. And
old.
Yeah, I'm gonna mention them to you. You tell me if you remember them. But my wife hadn't heard of them, and I was just like dumbfounded. Yeah. Do you remember the little squirrel?
Wee.
Yeah. So she didn't see that. Do you remember that it was like a little rap video kind of? It was called "Got Rice." It was like an Asian pride video.
Yeah, like vaguely.
Got rice, bitch. Got rice.
Yeah, you're like bringing it back. I haven't thought about that in a long, long time. But yeah,
that's what I expected to hear from you.
Do you remember my new haircut?
You have to give me more.
Jaeger bombs.
Jaeger bombs. Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you remember? I'm the Juggernaut, bitch.
I remember that from the X-Men movie.
From the X-Men movie. So this is a video where somebody dubbed over the old X-Men cartoon.
Okay.
And it's like some like
I wonder
super urban like voice. They put like a black dude's voice on Juggernaut.
Okay.
You don't know this?
No, I don't. Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, you should.
I wonder because Vinnie Jones as the Juggernaut in the X-Men movie says, "I'm the Juggernaut, bitch." And I wonder if that was influenced by the meme or if the meme came after the movie and it was like a reference to the movie, because like it was a corny ass line. Like it was kind of a goofy ass line. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were like making fun of it and the meme came after, but I would prefer that the meme came first and that they were referencing the meme.
What I think that is the case. What X-Men movie are you referring to?
I don't know. One of those fucking X-Men.
One of the early ones?
Yeah.
Because this on the Juggernaut bitch video goes back to like the early days of, like the early 2000s.
Okay.
So
yeah, it's been so long since I watched. I think it might have been. What was Juggernaut in the first X-Men movie? I don't even fucking remember. I don't think
so. It's been a long time, man.
Yeah, dude.
That was Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, Hugh Jackman.
Back in the day.
Huge jacked man.
Yes, indeed. And he can sing.
I also I think he's gay. I'm pretty sure Hugh Jackman's gay.
You think?
Yeah. Very.
Isn't he married?
I mean, it's called a beard, dude.
Yeah. I've heard of them.
Yeah.
So what's new, man?
Same old shit. Working a lot. I've been wanting to get some more solo shits going, but I'm so like spread thin and working so much that when I get home, my house is a fucking mess, you know?
Yeah.
When I get home, I just don't want to do anything.
Are you working 6 days a week?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm about to get a little bit of a break, so that's good, but I'm not going to let it be too much of a break. I was working a seasonal job, and that's about wrapped up. So I'm going to have to find something different.
That'll kick back up again in the winter, or?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to go back though.
Okay.
Yeah. Looking to broaden the horizons,
diversify.
Exactly.
I'm the paterfamilias. Yeah. I'm the goddamn paterfamilias.
Other than that, what's new? Not much, man. Just I've been watching a lot. It sucks. I'm back on keto, so that's new. I've been at it for a while. I actually think I'm starting to lose some weight again.
I got to get on that train, man.
Yeah, man, jump on. We're chugging along.
But I got 5 beers in the fridge. You saw them. What am I supposed to do with them? I can't just throw them away, Kyle.
I've got 3 beers in the fridge that have been sitting there for.
Good for you, man. Willpower.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of beer is it? It's a good beer too. I can't remember.
Good for you,
it's
man.
Good shit. Yeah, I just need to lose some more weight. But I've been back on keto, so chugging along at that. That's new. It's weird because I've been watching, like when I get home from my jobs and I'm like tired and just like ready to watch TV and do nothing.
Yep.
I've been watching YouTube per usual, but I've been watching a lot of like cooking videos.
Okay.
And it's all food that I can't fucking eat, So like, but I do when I've gotten down to a good weight and I can start like eating other things and just working out to maintain my weight.
Yeah.
I'm excited to do some cooking, man. I love cooking.
Yeah,
and
for
baking.
sure.
I really want to do some baking.
Like what? What do you like? Bread?
Breads, yeah, and
yeah.
desserts.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's just fun.
You're gonna be like Tom Papa,
I
baking
love
bread.
cooking. Yeah, I mean, I do kind of want to start with sourdough, so it's good bread.
I would love that, man. I love sourdough bread.
Yeah, you're gonna be on keto though. You can't have it.
Shit.
Unless you start now, then we can be off of it at the same time.
Yeah.
My plan is to stay on keto all the way through until end of September when Oktoberfest is, and then get fucked up.
Okay. Yeah.
Go there, drink like 6 beers that are like this big.
Yeah.
I did that last year.
Yeah.
6 of them.
I'm disappointed I didn't go with you. I could have, but I
went 3 days.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a 2 weekend thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's 5 days because they do 3 days the first weekend, 2 days the second weekend. And I went to half of the days, or over half that they had them.
Well, I want to try to go with you one day this season.
Yeah, man.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I have a friend. You met him, my buddy Bill. Bill, he's he's kind of a big dude.
Got to get that dude on here. He was talking about some interesting things.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy. But anyway, he had like a heart episode.
I think I'm talking about the right guy. The guy who was talking about the ownership of the Negro Leagues, or is that a different guy?
I can't remember
when we did the Asha Logos episode. Him and his wife were here.
Yeah, that's the one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But so he had an episode with his heart, and he's been in the hospital for a couple days, and he's going to be in the
man.
hospital for a couple more. Yeah, man, it's scary. It's not somebody I would have expected.
This guy that I go to church with, his name is Tim. He is an older fella, but you wouldn't tell by looking at him. He looks great for his age.
Yeah.
He had a heart attack recently. So
Jesus.
Yeah. Scary shit, man. I worry about the old ticker.
I worry about mine
because I've been fat my whole life. That's the main thing. Like, I don't really have heart problems that run in my family that I know of. There's half of my genetic history that I don't really have a whole lot of insight on.
Yeah, for sure.
But the side that I know about, actually, I guess my grandma did have some kind of heart issues, but it wasn't like heart issues.
Yeah.
Her heart would go out of rhythm, and they had to shock her and stop her heart and then start it again.
It's fucked up.
That kind of shit. Yeah.
Do you know this fellow? I'm going to try. I don't know his last name, so I'm just going to Google it real quick and see if I can find it.
Who is it going to be?
Darn it. Hold on. It's this that I need.
What's he do for a living?
He is a classicist. He's an ancient Greek expert.
Classicist.
Yeah.
Is it?
There he is. Dr. Ammon Hillman. Have you ever
Hillman.
encountered this guy? He looks like
Hillman.
Let me, where's the images? There it is. Have you ever seen this guy before on YouTube?
Nope.
So he's got a YouTube channel. I can't remember what it's called. I just got introduced to the guy, but he's pretty fascinating. He was on the Danny Jones podcast, and
the fuck is Danny Jones?
I'm not even really sure. He just popped up at some point on my radar. Danny Jones. Anyway, when he goes on Danny Jones, he's talking about.
Did you just close the?
No,
you just minimized
it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, Danny Jones podcast. He was talking about what he does for a living. He's an expert in ancient Greek, and he has a perspective on Christianity that's very different because he knows what the words mean. He knows, and most people don't. He said some interesting stuff. He said that if you were going to read the Bible, you should read the Septuagint.
Yeah.
Which isn't. I mean, I have access to it because on sacredtext.com you can access it for free, but I never fucked with it. And even if I was reading it, it would be the English translation anyway.
Certain translations of the Bible are translated versions of the Septuagint. Like I think the King James is based on the Septuagint.
Okay.
I mean, the King James is a bunch of fruity language, a bunch of Shakespeare, these and thous, and in a theological context, the King James has some issues. I kind of, I don't want to say over my head to get into, but I just don't, I've got like a lot of like halfway knowledge up in the old noggin, and I start speaking on things, and then somebody asks me like a detailed question. I'm like, I fucking know, dude.
Yeah. Get in over your skis real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like the translation of the Bible that I read most of the time, I switch back and forth. I have an app on my phone and you can switch back and forth between them pretty easily. Yeah. But the one I go to mostly is the ESV, the English Standard Version. Yeah. And I think it's mostly based on the Septuagint too.
Yeah. Interesting. So this guy has some pretty out there ideas, and it was a very strange, it was like a 3.5 hour conversation. And I was glued. I was glued to it. I could not stop. I like literally when it was time, like right around time to go to bed, my wife usually stays downstairs and watches some TV, and I go upstairs and watch whatever I want to watch. I just ducked out a little early, went upstairs, so I keep watching this fucking conversation. I was glued to it.
Yeah.
This guy said all kinds of stuff that.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of a heretic is he?
10.
10?
Yeah.
I had a feeling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he said some interesting things. He talked about drugs nonstop. Not just about, well, not at all about his taking drugs, although if you hear him talk, he's definitely familiar with them. But all about the role that drugs played in the ancient world. And that was pretty interesting to me. But when he starts talking about Jesus, it was fucked up, dude. Okay. Fucked up. First of all, he said some stuff like that. He said some stuff like Jesus, or not Jesus, but Christ, that word in Greek, it has a medicinal connotation. And that Jesus, his apostles were children. And there's a lot of references to when in the Bible when Jesus talks about the little children.
Yeah.
And he says that in the Greek, Jesus calls his apostles his children.
Okay.
And that he was a pederast. That he was fucking these kids.
Whoa.
That
I was gonna make like a Michael Jackson reference, but I didn't, because I was like, oh, I don't want to imply that Jesus was. Yeah, that's what this guy was implying.
And the look on your face and the look on my face is about how I felt.
Oh man, I like out of the gate can't take this dude seriously.
But I want to know, it's like, where do you get this from? And he says that,
I mean, my bullshit alarms are going off.
Yeah, well, it's hard to write him off when he's a PhD classicist and is suggesting to you that you don't know what the words mean. He does. You know what I mean?
It's not hard for me at all. I'm like willing to chuck this dude's opinion straight into the garbage. Because you know who else knew how to read the Septuagint? The fucking priests and people who translated the Septuagint, 1,000 years ago. So yeah, no,
I had some thoughts on it too. Like a couple of the apostles whose names I probably couldn't pinpoint, but they were fishermen. And a
lot of them were fishermen.
And I have a hard time thinking that when Jesus goes up to the beach and sees the fishermen and says, "Throw down your nets and follow me," that they were children with nets. I have a hard time with that. But he has this whole explanation about how there was like psychedelic drugs that there were concoctions that involved venom from snakes that people would take. And this was true in some of the like the Bacchanalian, the mysteries of other kinds that were popular around the first century. And that the drug that got you high or gave you an altered state was toxic. There's no way around it. So you had to have the drug, but you also had to have the antidote. And what the antidote was semen of prepubescent boys,
Where?
or something like that.
Yeah.
This is his explanation. So Christos, whatever this medicinal quality of the word, it has to do, in his opinion, with the some mystery and some sort of psychedelic or altered state, and the reason he hung around with kids because he needed the antidote, and he's going on and on about this sort of thing. Meanwhile, Danny Jones is like, "Have you heard of the sacred mushroom and the cross?" And Dr. Hillman's like, "Yeah, I don't take that seriously." And I was just like, "What?"
Yeah.
That's exactly the same kind of, but that's also strange because there's a lot of overlap between the mushroom fertility cult stuff that you hear about in the sacred mushroom perspective to what he's trying to say about Jesus and the apostles.
Yeah. You like the sex cult stuff? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. I would be more comfortable lending some credence to some aspect of the sacred mushroom and the cross,
Yeah.
than I would be to the ideas that this guy's pushing. I can't take that seriously at all.
I don't blame you. I just have to ask myself, what if this guy is right? I'm not saying I think he is, but what would it mean if he was? And for all of modern Western history, we've been Christians and have no idea what that really where it comes from, what it really means.
So your position of Jesus is coming to be that he was a shape-shifting pederast.
No, but a shapeshifter, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that part for sure.
I'm gonna have a really hard time with it, but I would be curious if you just gave it a watch just for a while to see what
I'll watch
what
it.
you think of him as a person.
Oh, I can already tell you.
Well, I can tell you that he
seems like
he says "Hail Satan" in his on his YouTube channel. He says that he says that on every episode, but he explains that it's kind of a sort of a Gnostic thing that that if you know the language of the Old Testament by the way, he says some shit about that too. Let me get back to the Old Testament. But if you know the language, I'm losing it. Let me circle back. He said that the Old Testament wasn't written until the 3rd century AD, that it was written in Greek and not in Hebrew. That was never the case, that the original Old Testament was a Hellenic Greek document.
Yeah.
And was written, was copied into Hebrew from the Greek. And how you can tell
there's truth to that. I know I've just from like the stuff that I know about the Bible. I mean, the Bible was clearly not, I don't want to say written because it was oral tradition for a long time.
Right.
So originally it was being spoken in ancient Hebrew, but yeah, the first time the Bible was written, it was written in Aramaic and Greek for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
and like Jesus didn't speak Hebrew. Jesus spoke Aramaic. Jesus probably spoke Greek really well.
Yeah. Aramaic is related to Greek, I believe. It's
yeah, maybe, I don't know.
I think it's closer.
I think it's a Semitic language, Aramaic.
It is. Yeah, but I think it's somehow related to Greek. I won't look it up at the moment, but I might be wrong.
But yeah, there is some truth to that, and I think that I'm not trying to lump this this heretic Satan worshiping douche in with Graham Hancock, because I actually like Graham Hancock a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of the people who don't like Graham Hancock are saying he's come up with this crazy theory to get notoriety. Yeah. And that's what I think is going on with this
guy.
I don't think he actually believes any of it. I think he's, again, I haven't watched him, so I don't know, but dude's just trying to get attention.
Yeah. And he might legitimately be crazy. He's definitely legitimately very, very smart. I mean, if you listen to him, you'll pick up on that. Yeah, he's covered in tattoos, including on his head, and it's all ancient Greek. It's like he, his skin is covered in script.
Is he gay?
I don't know.
He's probably gay,
but he does believe, this is the first point that I got away from earlier. He does believe that the God that is worshipped by Christians and Jews is the devil.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and there are Gnostic groups that believe that. But I've been seeing some kind of interesting shit about Yao.
Yao.
Yao, which is a version of the Tetragrammaton that appears in Greek in ancient,
Mm-hmm.
early, Christian period.
YHWH.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is well, I don't know what the Greek letters are, so I'm going to be speaking out of school, but that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
But apparently there's legitimate reason to connect Yao to at least a polytheistic God and not the monotheistic God, but maybe even the devil.
Mm.
So I've been going down some Christian rabbit holes, and
That's not a Christian rabbit hole, dude. That's a satanic rabbit hole.
Well, I've been going down some Christian rabbit holes because I haven't really explored it as much as I should have.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a really long time to find myself interested in taking those deep dives.
You want to go down some Christian rabbit holes and some church history rabbit holes.
Mhm.
I would recommend like Jay Dyer, because Jay Dyer is good at that kind of
Mhm,
shit.
mhm.
And you know, I'm not an Orthodox person. I go to a Lutheran church. But I think that if I want the history of Christianity, I'm going to go to Christians, to the people who established the church. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I'm not going to go to people who say "Hail Satan." You know?
No, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to go back to the really early first, second century,
Yeah.
and read the early church fathers from that period. And the reason for that is partly because I really want to understand like what Christianity was like before it was formed, you know. But I'm also interested to learn more about the Gnostics now that I've come to the conclusion that my brand of Christianity, if it can be called anything, I think it would be called Gnostic. And I never really quite understood that until the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was reading the definition of Gnosticism, just wiki Gnosticism, and I was reading through it, and a lot of the shit that's in there I don't agree with.
Yeah.
So like where a lot of the Gnostics believed that that the body and matter were evil, and that what you wanted to be was spirit. So you move away from the physical, you move away from the body, the things of the body. You give up sex, you give up enjoying food, you move away and live like a hermit. You try to become more spiritual because that's the goal. But the body is bad and the spirit is good.
Yeah.
I don't believe that at all. And there's things like that. But one of the tenets that's common to many Gnostic beliefs is that salvation is achieved by an individual spiritual experience, a personal spiritual experience. And that's not particularly different than what you hear in Orthodox Christianity, because they say that, you know, you have
Depends
to be,
on how you mean it.
you have to be born again.
Yeah.
And that's something that happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's something between you and God, you know? So I think that's true. I think that there's something about that
It's kind of between you and God. But I mean, when you become a Christian, you know, again, it depends on, you know, whether you're Orthodox or Catholic or Protestant, how you feel about this. The Orthodox, you know, what I'm getting at is it's kind of between you and God, but also you come into the body of Christ, which is the church, which is people, you know?
I want to know how old that idea is.
Yeah.
That the church is the body of Christ. I really would like to know when that started to be a thing.
I think it's old.
I'm sure it's old, but it's not from Jesus's mouth. It's not in the Gospels. Maybe it's in Paul. I don't know if it's, maybe it's in Paul. I don't know.
Are you sure that it's not in the Gospels?
I'm pretty sure. I could
Yeah,
be
it
wrong.
might not be. I could, you know, I'm not sure.
I thought that
I'm not a Bible scholar.
I thought that was one of those dogmatic things that came later. Like, but I could be wrong. I mean, I've been wrong before. And like I said, I neglected Christianity because I wasn't interested. I was born into it, and so it wasn't interesting the way that like exotic religions from far off places were. So I didn't really give it the attention it deserves. And now I think I'm starting to get to that point where I want to do that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that there are roads that are dead ends, you know, even there. But, you know, It sounds interesting at the very least.
Yeah.
I do think that I'm pretty sure in the Gospels that the church is referred to as the bride of Christ. So that's like kind of,
Yeah, that bridegroom language has definitely sounded familiar.
no,
Yeah, well, the more you know.
that that groom bride relationship between the church and Christ. It's like, you're the husband to your wife, you're the leader of your family. And that is, that's how the church is supposed to look at Christ. It's not, I mean, I guess there is like a sexual gender aspect to it, but it's mostly that like you look to Christ as the leader of the church, the way that the wife looks to the husband as the leader,
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that I think that's right out of Jesus's mouth. Again, I'm not a Bible scholar.
Yeah.
I've read a good chunk of it at this point, but you got to like read it a bunch for it to like really stick up in the old head, you know?
Yeah. You brought up the shape shifting Jesus.
Shape shifting.
Yeah. So I did that episode on shape shifting Jesus. Did you finish the thing?
Yeah.
And what did you think?
We talked about this on the
we
podcast.
Already did.
Yeah.
Did you listen to Yahweh the Dragon?
No, I haven't listened to that yet.
Yeah. So both of those episodes to me came from other podcasts, the seed of the idea, and then I just did my thing with it.
Yeah.
And the one that I did most recently was was Jesus a shapeshifter, but this was Yahweh a dragon.
Oh.
Because I found this dude named Mr. Mythos on YouTube, and he's pretty interesting. But he had this episode about scriptures that describe God in ways that sound a lot like a dragon. So I put them together, and I added the whole thing that Jordan Peterson
Slaying the dragon.
No, I didn't really touch on the hero story, but I did about Tiamat, Tehom Tiamat, the dragon of chaos, and they're there in the beginning. So you have this close association between God the Father, God the Creator, and this dragon of chaos, and that's in the Bible as the Leviathan. But it was, I wasn't quite sure how to fit the Leviathan thing in there, because in the Bible, even though Leviathan and Behemoth are like associated with the primordial creation, it's not clear to me that Leviathan is God. The Bible doesn't seem to be describing Leviathan as God.
Yeah.
But there are places where the Bible says that God breathed smoke out of his nose and fire out of his mouth. And the Psalms talk about the prayers in the Psalms talk about the people asking for God's protection under his wings, and all these different things that stack up.
Yeah.
And then there was the last one that was really interesting was in Deuteronomy. There's a lot of warfare going on in Deuteronomy. And at one point, the Israelites, I don't know, I think they were called Israelites at the time. They defeat the Midianites, and they take all the spoils of war. And then it describes how much, livestock and gold and things they got from the Midianites. And then it describes them offering part of what they have received, the spoils of war. They offer it to God. And so what the image you have is livestock, virgins, and gold being given to God.
Sounds like Smaug.
I brought Smaug up. I brought Smaug up in that episode.
Yeah.
So anyway, just some shit like that I thought was pretty interesting. So give that a listen.
Yeah, I'll check that out. It's like that kind of stuff. I just have a hard time. I have a hard time buying into the idea that this random dork on YouTube like figured out that God was a dragon, and all of the church fathers missed that.
The question is, if there's truth to the idea that the image of a dragon is associated with God, which is not a weird thing to suggest. Dragons are part of mythology all over the world, all across time, and they hold a pretty important position in many mythologies. Just look at the Asian cultures, the Chinese, the Japanese. The dragon's huge, and then in Mesoamerica, the plumed serpent, it's everywhere. So the idea that the image of a dragon is associated with God is not unusual. The question is, what does it mean?
What does it all mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
So that's the question I try to answer in that episode.
All right, I'll check it out. Right. I forget what I was gonna say. There was something else there, but I can't remember it.
Yeah. Oh, you were talking about the church fathers missed all the details, but
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I don't know, man. I guess just to expound on that, there's like this corpus of philosophers and theologians and, the people who built the church. And, I guess maybe they were using like coded language. They didn't want to like put it straight out there that,
yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, I haven't read Job, but I want to.
It's a tough book to read. I've started reading Job many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Carl Jung wrote a book called Answer to Job.
Mm.
And I have 2 copies of it. It's not a big book. It's a small book. I want to read it so bad, but I don't know the Job story, only high level. I know a lot of bad things happen to him, and Job never curses God, right? That's what I know. Yeah. I don't know anything else. So I want to read the story before I read the Jung book. So that's going to be on the agenda. Why did I bring up Job? Oh, because in Job, you have a council of angels. Like God is there in the council of angels, yep. And the devil's there amongst them. And so this whole council of angels idea, this is connected to something. What was it? It's connected to like a kind of a polytheism. It's like the way that the people that would become the Jewish people, these early Israelite tribes, the way they thought about God. This is another rabbit hole that I've been getting into. It's this idea that the Yahwist, there was a group of people that worshiped Yahweh as a high God, mm-hmm. But they were polytheistic Canaanites. They were polytheistic like everybody else.
Yeah.
But Yahweh existed. He was their high God. And those tribes that believed in Yahweh, one of them became the Israelites. So it's like, that makes a lot of sense. The Canaanites also worship El, right? El is the high God. That's another word that's used for God in the Bible. God is called El and Yahweh. And there, for a group in these ancient polytheistic religions, Yahweh was the high God and El was one of the other gods. Mm. So you would have a council of gods, Yahweh being the high God and all the other gods being underneath. And that's not an unusual image for that polytheistic, ancient polytheistic type of thing anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And then you see echoes of it in the Bible, in things like the book of Job, where you have all of the angels getting together and God is there and they're all, planning whatever they planned to try and curse poor Job. But anyway, what do you think of that? What do you think of that idea?
Of like specifically, what do you
like echoes of a time when the Israelites weren't monotheistic?
Well, I mean, I believe the Bible, like literally, to a certain extent. I think that there are aspects of the Bible that are like metaphorical and things like that. But I think even those metaphorical things are like underpinned by real things. You know what I mean? Mm. So I believe, and we've talked about this before, in the sense that I believe like shamans are a corruption of, the priests, the priestly class and things like that. I think the Israelites, I think that, God created Adam and Eve, and we, the human race descended from Adam and Eve. And I think that the Israelites, I mean, the Old Testament is full of this, of the Israelites having the truth, straying away from the truth, getting smacked around by God because of it, and then coming back to the truth and then straying away from the truth. Right. I mean, the Old Testament that's what the Old Testament is,
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I mean, I think that, they're it doesn't surprise me that they worshipped, Yahweh is actually like a new world invention word. It's like, they didn't say Yahweh. That's like I think that's from like the 1800s or something.
Yeah.
Yahweh.
That pronunciation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jordan says Yahweh. Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Yahweh.
We have no idea how they pronounce it.
Well, that thing I brought up earlier about Yahoo, that's another way it could have been pronounced.
Yeah. But that's the thing about ancient Hebrew, is it was a very primitive language. And we have no idea how things were pronounced. It's literally all guesswork.
Yeah. Yes. One of the things that Dr. Amon Hillman guy said, he said that one of the reasons why you can tell that the Old Testament was written in Greek is because the ancient Greek language has, I think he said, like 22,000 unique words. Ancient Hebrew has 8.
Yeah.
So when you read the Greek, it's so much more. There's so much more there. And when you read the Hebrew, you see a simplified version.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have the words to say what that's one of his pieces of evidence.
Yep.
I thought that was kind of interesting.
It is interesting. That podcast I did with the 2 Orthodox fellas, Nectarios and Doomerdoxy, they would be good to talk to about this kind of stuff too.
When are we going to do that?
On, I think Nectario said it like one of the Sundays at the end of this month, maybe the 28th is what he said. I don't know if that's a Sunday.
Okay.
But somewhere in that area. I need to message him. It's been a while. But I forget what I was saying about that.
Just that they would be good to talk about.
No, before that, what was I saying? See,
you brought up Nectaris, but you were going somewhere. I just don't know where you were going with that.
What were we talking about right before that?
I brought up Dr. Hillman again.
So I'm not even smoking weed anymore, man. It's like long-term effects of, but I think basically I know kind of where I was going, and it's that, I mean, ancient Hebrew was a very primitive language. We really don't know very much about it. We have no idea how things were pronounced. And the Septuagint, the story of, from what I understand, I'm pretty sure I'm getting this right. Maybe it was an emperor. Yeah. So when the Greek people took over Alexandria, Egypt and Alexandria and stuff like that, it must have been one of those, man, what was the name
of what? It was Alexander the Great.
The ones who took over after, was the Seleucid?
Ptolemy?
It was Ptolemy. Yeah, it was one of the Ptolemies, I believe.
Did you know that Ptolemy was also a student of Aristotle?
That doesn't surprise me.
Alexander the Great and Ptolemy were students of Aristotle.
No, that doesn't surprise me. But yeah, one of the Ptolemies, knew about this Christian, or not. Well, I would say Christian. A lot of people would say Jewish. This religion, and wanted to know what it was all about. So he had a bunch of priests. What is Septuagint? What is the root of Septuagint?
That's a good question.
Maybe I think it's like 62. He had 62, Christian priests or whatever, translate it from ancient Hebrew into Greek. And the story is that he had them all do it. And then when they compared and contrasted, he had them like completely separated. He's like, all of you do this. Yeah. And they were all the same. Identical. Exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah. That would have had to have been one of the Ptolemies down the line, because Alexander.
Yeah, it was for
Alexander
sure.
was like 400 BC when he came in. Yeah. He founded Alexandria. Yeah. That's interesting. All right. So I'm tempted, because we started talking about the Bible and the Hebrews, I'm tempted to jump into what I thought was going to be the main topic of conversation today. So I have a question for you. I want to talk about Darryl Cooper's series, Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem, which talks all about, I'm telling the audience, but I'm looking at you and telling you something that.
Well, we gotta have some exposition here, so people know what we're talking about.
Kyle was the one that told me about the podcast, and now I'm in the situation where I'm looking at him and going,
"But I understand,
Darryl Cooper.
This is a good series.
It is a fantastic series. If anybody hasn't checked out Darryl Cooper's podcast, you should do that. It's called Martyr Made. It's got a freaking awesome, epic little opening bit with the. I don't know what it's from, but it's so fucking cool.
I think it's quotes from several like movies or something like
old
that.
Movies. Yeah. Anyway, he does a series on the history of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and he starts the story in the 1800s, and he goes through basically 1948, maybe a little bit beyond that, just barely.
Yeah.
But that's what he does. And it takes him 26 hours plus, something like that. 6 episodes, long 3-hour podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Well, the last 2 were like over 5 hours for sure.
How many episodes were
6.
they? Okay. Were they 5 hours? Gee,
not all of them.
The last ones.
The last two, yeah, definitely over
Epic.
5 hours. Yeah,
It was epic. There's something that a little bit Dan Carlin about it.
yeah, I like Martyr Made more than I like
Dan.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I haven't listened to a hardcore history in forever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about Darryl's style and just like the implications that he gets into about history and things like political implications, things like that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Compared to Dan Carlin.
Yeah.
So I don't think Dan Carlin would touch the Fear and Loathing. I don't think he would touch that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, probably.
Dan Carlin is very interesting, but he's pretty PC. Like he doesn't really go out on a limb. He used to do that. Dan Carlin's Common Sense, and he just like stopped doing that because people would get upset with him.
Yeah.
Whereas Darryl. So you listened to this series. That was the first series that he did. But at least like he must have done stuff before because he had like kind of an audience. But this is like those were like the first episodes of Martyr Made.
It goes back to like 2015, I think.
It's a while ago.
It's a while ago.
And Darryl Cooper has come a long way. Like
Really?
If Darryl was doing those episodes today, I have a feeling that they might be very different.
Really?
Yeah, Darryl's like kind of a right-wing guy,
Yeah.
At this point. Like he's been on Pete Quinones' podcast. He's been on Oren McIntyre's podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, I need to check that out.
Yeah, you should.
Just the idea of somebody interviewing him as a person. I don't know the first thing about him, but I love his shit.
Yeah.
I gotta watch some of those interviews.
Yeah. I mean, he's not like the most right-wing guy in the world or anything like that, but he's open to talk at this point. He's open to talking about a lot of things that, like I said, in Fear and Loathing, he definitely is a lot more fair about Zionists than a lot of people are. He like portrays them in a pretty fair light, but I think he may have done it differently if he was doing it now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How old is Darryl Cooper?
I don't know. I would guess 40 something, but I'm not sure.
And I don't know anything about him as a person. I know he said in that series in Fear and Loathing that he was working a full-time job and doing this on the side. But I don't know what his full-time job is. I don't know what his deal is.
I'm pretty sure he worked for like the State Department or something like that.
Oh,
he worked in government for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So long story short, Kyle told me about this podcast years and years ago. I listened to it. It blew my mind. I had my thoughts going into that were inherited from my dad a bit and from the history teaching that I endured in high school and in college. And it was very sympathetic to the plight of the Jews.
The poor Jews.
Yep. So I believed.
Which, I mean, there's some of that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I believe that, like, I'm assuming many people listening will maybe find themselves in a similar situation.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That what happened to the Jews during the Second World War was one of the great tragedies
it's real bad
of world history.
Real bad things.
It's real bad. No, seriously, really bad. And that the world, or at least the great powers of the world, decided that the solution to remedy this terrible thing.
Oh, did the powers of the world decide that?
Well, the United Nations, right?
Yeah.
That the Jewish people needed to have a homeland of their own, and that seemed pretty reasonable. And that's where I was coming from listening to this. I didn't know any of the history really. Yeah. Now I did know, because I was brought up a Christian, that the Jews have a deep history in the Holy Land, and that the idea that Israel, or that Jerusalem, let's say as a hypothetical, is their ancient city. That idea, I swallow that, right? I'm like, yeah, that's a Jewish fucking, city.
Depends on how far you go back.
Yeah. See, and that's the thing. But I know about King David. I know about King Solomon. I believed that this part of the world belonged to the Jews as much as to the Arabs, and they had the argument, and the powers of the world after the Second World War were behind the Jews, and we all had to, we all should just accept that, and it didn't go to the level like where my Warhawk father would say, well, Israel is a great ally in the part of the world where we need a presence, we need allies there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that. That wasn't even part of it. It was just what I explained to you. Bad things happened to the Jews. The great powers of the world decided this was the solution, and everybody should get the fuck on board. We don't want this to ever happen again. And it was really as simple as that.
Oh yeah. It just popped into my head what I was going to say when I lost my train of thought.
But
so that episode that I did with the guys, Nectarios and John, we talked about a podcast called Stone Choir.
Yeah.
And I'll send you over some, so basically Stone Choir is these two Lutheran guys talking about Christian theology, specifically Lutheran Christian theology. And mostly it's strictly about theology, about living a Christian life, how to interpret the Bible, things like that. But sometimes they veer into like cultural, political things. And they did like a whole 5-episode series on like Jewish things,
Okay.
And I'm going to send you that over. I think that you would be interested in it.
Yeah.
I wish that I had time to like listen to it again for this conversation, because a lot of what they talk about is like relevant to the history of the Jews and things like that.
Yeah.
And, like this idea that the Jews of today are entitled to that land and things like that, and that they are God's chosen people. And I'm just going to come out and like say that I do not believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they are entitled to that land. I don't believe that they are God's chosen people. I don't believe any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's any good reason to believe it.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think one of the most interesting like revelations about this, listening to this podcast through, is the idea that at the time when this was all happening and up to the present, there are Jewish people in the world who aren't Zionists, who don't believe in the idea of a Jewish state in Israel, that want to, there's a lot of liberal and non-religious Jews in Europe and in America that just want to be American or Czech or,
German,
Russian or German
English,
or whatever.
French,
Yeah, exactly. And that those people at the time were vehemently against what some of the Zionists that they called, they call them Zionists, the project that they wanted to do, which was to create a national homeland for the Jewish people.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people then and now who want no part of it. I think it's interesting that
I think less now.
You think?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's been established. I mean, the nation's been established for a long time. Maybe hearts and minds changed a little bit, but I think that there are these protesters, these Palestinian protesters, the ones that are just, you find out someone's Jewish and you go and you try to beat them up on campus. Like we've seen a few instances of this happening.
Yeah.
Those people don't realize that liberal atheist Jews, and maybe the ones that they're targeting, have absolutely zero interest.
Probably not. I mean, I think that a lot of these liberal non-Zionist Jews are likely to be in those protests. You know what I mean? They're likely to be out there protesting.
Yeah, you're right.
Like a lot of these Jewish people who are getting targeted, I think it's a pretty safe bet that they're Zionists,
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't know, but
I would be willing to put money on the fact that like the majority of the Jewish population throughout the world is Zionist at this point. Again, not all of them.
Yeah.
I'm not making them a monolith, but yeah, I think most of them are. I think most of them believe that they are entitled to it. And I think that even if it's not entitled because of religious reasons, they're entitled to it for their own safety and nationalist reasons, which I think is interesting because a lot of these kind of liberal Jewish people who think that they should have a right to a Jewish homeland for nationalistic reasons are not at all okay with us being nationalist, which is interesting.
It is
real interesting.
Yeah.
I got a pretty big problem with that, honestly.
Yeah.
That's a lot of what I took from the first time that I listened to Fear and Loathing.
Yeah.
A lot of what I took from it is that, and this was before I really dug into and knew as much about like Talmudic Judaism as I do at this point. Not to say I know a bunch about it, but
Right.
I know more about it than most people. Is the double standards. They abound, man. They have a different set of rules for themselves than they do for other people. And that is not exclusive to the religious kind.
Yeah.
You know, I think for the non-religious kind, it comes from like a kind of like victimhood mentality.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, we're special. You know, like the religious ones are, we're special because we're God's chosen people. The liberal Zionist religious ones are like, we're special because we're like a special kind of victim. You know, everyone hates us for no reason.
Yeah.
And
that's terrible, man. I mean, it's a terrible plague. This compassion, this overwhelming compassion that's behind the woke movement, but it's also behind this self-loathing, pity. What you were just describing, the pity me.
yeah, that is gross.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not exclusive to them. It's like, I mean, I even think some white people are getting into this shit now. You know, it's like, and like right-wing white people are getting into this. Like, oh, we're so. And okay, what I was gonna say there is, I'll just say it so that I can go back and make my other point. It's like a lot of these white people, these like right-wing white people, are like, oh, we're persecuted. White people are the ones who are persecuted. We've got it so bad now. And I don't necessarily disagree. You know, like I think that we are. Demographics are shifting. They're shifting intentionally, whether people want to admit it or not. And I do think that white people are like kind of targeted. We're kind of like singled out. We're at a disadvantage in a lot of ways
100%,
in our own country.
100%.
But, and I wish that I kind of would have said this before we started talking about this at all. So a lot of people will talk about the Jews, you know, and they act like, oh, they run everything, you know, like they're omnipotent. They control everything, and we can't do anything because the Jews are just going to come smash it. And I fucking hate those people. Do I think that Jewish people are extremely overrepresented in positions of power? 100%. But do I think that we're like powerless and like, let's imagine that the Jews are literally running everything. Okay. How do things seem like they're working out for them right now? Not great.
Not great.
Yeah. It's like if they are running everything, they're dropping the fucking ball, you know? So this idea that we don't have a chance. And it's like white people, racial cuckoldry. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like, it's pathetic and I hate it. So just take that when we get to talking about this, because I'm going to be very frank in this conversation about how I feel about Jewish influence and going all the way back to, the early times.
Sure.
But I don't think that they are like the puppet master controlling literally everything. No. I think that that's a fucking stupid, pathetic thing to think.
Well, it's funny because that came up in this series, about maybe the third episode in. This was another thing I wanted to bring up.
He was talking about it in the very first episode.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, there's something.
He talks about he like makes reference to it a few times.
Well, what I'm specifically referring to is when he was discussing. There's a couple of different types of Zionism, and I'm trying to remember which one this was. But he was talking about
what is the motivate? Like this particular type of Zionism, what is their aim? What are they trying to do?
Hold on, let me think through this. It's a lot.
You've got like political Zionism.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that.
You've got evolutionary Zionism. You've got a couple other ones too, but like I said, it's been a while, so
we're getting too far from the thread. Where were we there? What were we on?
Different brands of Zionism.
Yeah, but right before that,
I don't remember.
Shit.
Them being in power and him referencing that.
Yeah. He was. I think this had to do with political Zionism at the time. He was saying that the strategy was to get in good with the politicians in the British Parliament. And in America, in order to persuade rich people and other Jews to come or to send money or, to give them political leverage in one way or another. And it's smart. It's smart, that idea. But Darryl Cooper explains that during that phase of the process, the rumors about powerful Jews in different places in the country that can make it very difficult for you if you don't come along with us, that was completely made up. No. He explains that it was a strategy.
Yeah.
It was like, we're going to get these people afraid because it's true, right? It's true that Jews were in positions of political authority in various places, that they were wealthy in various places, that they were involved in certain industries that were lucrative and important and strategic. Because it's true in enough cases, they were able to make the argument to other people that, there's a lot more Jews in those positions of power than you think. And if you make this difficult for us, you'll find out.
Yeah.
And they were bluffing. And Darryl Cooper explains it. They were bluffing in the beginning.
No, I'm not 100% sure that they were bluffing. And again, I'm not saying that they are like the complete puppet masters running everything, but that is one of those aspects that I think Darryl's tune might change and might have changed a little bit.
Interesting.
At this point. Because so in that, and that definitely is political Zionism. That's like Chaim Weitzman. And, he got political influence because he developed some kind of like way to make ammunition. Like they were running out of ammunition, and he was a scientist he was like a professor at a university, and he like found some way. They were short on some kind of chemical to make ammunition.
Yep.
And he like made a way that they could make it on an industrial scale.
Coming back. Yeah.
And he got, so he got in good with like the political power because of that. So that's definitely political Zionism.
Yes.
And
hold on, before we move away from political Zionism.
No, I wasn't going
okay,
to.
Keep going.
You go ahead.
No.
That's fine.
So there was one other thing surrounding that I wanted to. No, I fucking lost it. Oh, I know what it was. As I was hearing Darryl Cooper talk about political Zionism, should we explain what that means before we talk more about it?
So initially, back in like the early days of it, when Theodor Herzl wrote The Jew State, which was the name of the book. Darryl Cooper even says that I remember this specifically. He says it just sounds weird to say the Jew state, so he says the Jewish state. Theodor Herzl wrote a book called The Jew State, and it was about how they needed a place of their own. And, that was kind of like the birth of Zionism, like modern Zionism. And the idea before they even got to like the British political Zionism was the Ottoman Empire. Like we want to get in good with the Ottoman Empire, tell them, give us a spot of land in, Palestine area. And let us either have our own state or let us be subservient to you, but let us like run things on our own. We'll pay you taxes. We'll help you in wars, stuff like that, but we'll just run our own area.
Right.
So that's like political Zionism. It's like getting involved in the politics of these bigger countries and finding friends and allies in these bigger countries and having them, support the idea of retaking Palestine.
Yeah. And it transformed also from establishing a foothold in Palestine one way or another, that extended into immigration. Like, how do we get Jews to move here?
Yeah.
And the political Zionists were very skillful at encouraging, figuring out how to facilitate mass migration.
Eventually they were.
Yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, it was like a pipe dream. It almost seemed like,
absolutely. And this is what I wanted to ask you about, because there are a couple of ways you can get a country if you want to have a country.
Yeah.
Like if you're a people and you like the Kurds or somebody, if they wanted a country of their own, they could fight, they could kill people, they could win, they could win one. Well, that's one way, right?
Yeah.
Another way of doing it is,
but that's the truth for the Jews at that point. If they wanted to like take Palestine, it wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened in that early time, for sure. But another solution to that problem is a political solution. It's wheeling and dealing, and it's a political solution.
Yeah.
And what the Jews did with Palestine was I'm not going to say it was a noble thing, but what they did was they said, how do we get as many Jewish people as possible to move here so that we can be a large enough percentage of the population to actually start having some political muscle and to be able to strangle away ownership of the land for us? Like, how do we get enough people here that we can do that? And so their strategy was, let's just get enough people to move here until we make the rules.
Yeah.
And the question I wanted to ask you is, I know that this is not a fair statement, but I want to say it anyway.
Fuck fair. Who cares?
That is a bloodless way of winning a country for yourself.
Yeah.
And they did that.
Well,
right. There's something about that.
I mean, up to a certain point.
That's what I mean
that's
what I mean when I said it's not a fair statement, because there's blood everywhere.
Yeah.
But at this point in the story, they didn't choose the path of war. They
couldn't. Let's not pretend like it was an honorable thing.
True. However, I think some of those early Zionists wouldn't have wanted war. They were fleeing from war. You know what I mean? Like some of the later ones, like the Ben Gurions, those were the rah fucking kill Arab people. Some of the earlier ones, I don't think that they were far away from that mentality.
Yeah,
they just wanted to be fucking safe. And also, I'm going to jump all over the place. I should have prepared notes. I didn't know about the pogroms. I didn't really understand that.
Yeah.
So for those people who maybe are in my seat and didn't know what a pogrom was, am I even pronouncing that right?
Yeah, you are.
There were
close enough.
There were basically, I'm trying to think of there's like an analogy here I want to make, but I can't quite think of it. Like witch hunts, like pitchforks and torches.
Yeah. People
in Europe going to Jewish people's houses and burning them down and kicking them out of the country and raping and killing. Yeah. And this happened in mass. It happened in not just one family. It happened like whole villages of Jews got rounded up, and it happened all over the Russian Empire. It happened all over Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And this was before the Holocaust.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm reluctant to point to you now because I feel like you're going to say, "Well, here's why they deserved a pogroms." But go ahead.
I'm not going to say that they deserved a pogrom.
Yeah, pogrom. That sounds better.
But so there's this thing that people talk about with, mean Mr. Mustache, Uncle Adolf.
Yeah,
where they talk about. The things that happened in the 30s and 40s,
things that happened,
and the thing that they say is, and then one day for no reason at all, it's like, is that really what it was? Yeah. Was there no reason at all? And I, being a lightweight student of history, things don't just happen for no reason, and I think that plays into, like I was talking about, or like we were talking about earlier, with this uber victim mentality that Jewish people have,
Yeah.
Jewish people, a lot of them were poor, a lot of them lived in the Pale of Settlement and things like that, but they weren't all poor, they talk about how Jews weren't trusted and things like that. But then they also will say, yeah, but they ran the financial system, and it's like, do you put people in charge of the financial system of your finances that you don't trust?
No.
And when the livelihoods and the lifestyles and things like that of the host people who live in those countries, let's just take, and I'm not saying that the Jews are doing this to us or anything right now, but inflation's through the fucking roof. Let's say that we found out that it was the Jews who were doing this to us. We're just supposed to be like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. We'll just, so I don't know, man. I think that,
see, I resist the blanket statement, the Jews.
No, I do too.
Yeah,
I do. I mean, I resist it in some ways, but in other ways, like a lot of the people, the powerful ones who are calling shots, I don't feel comfortable putting the blame on, like, the deli Jews. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that they're the ones who are calling those shots, but I will say this. I think that a lot of them are like pretty sympathetic to it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, even if they're not the ones calling the shots, they support the shots being called. And, a bunch of fucking poor Russians who, these people have come into their culture, and, you've got these rich, powerful Jewish people who are making decisions that are having very adverse effects on the host population. And then the poor Jews are like, yeah, I mean, it's good. Like, I don't have a hard time imagining that the native Russians are going to be like, fuck this, and then things boil over and things get bad. I'm not like signing off on that. I don't think that those things are good, but it didn't just happen for no reason. Like, the way that they try to paint it to you, the way they try to paint the picture is that people just don't like us, like they just, and Darryl Cooper talks about this a lot in the series. It's like, we will, the Jews will never have a home in these places. We're always going to be second-class citizens, except for the fact that they weren't a lot of the time, especially in Western Europe. It's like they were doing pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you get these powerful Jews who want to form their own nation, and they start whipping all of the other ones up into this frenzy. You're never going to be safe. You're never going to fit in. They're never going to accept you.
However, it's hard to disagree with that in that time of pogroms and the Holocaust, and they aren't going to be safe.
But
and
why?
Well, so here's what I want to interject here. I agree with you that there's a reason for these things happening. I agree with you. But even Darryl Cooper, when he talks about, I get this analogy to the witch hunts of Salem, and the idea is something happens that's bad, like a plague, and people are looking for a scapegoat, and the person who's other is the one who the finger is pointed at. That was the case during the Salem witch trials. And it seems to have been the case with the Jews in Europe. The plague breaks out, and they point at the fucking 4 Jewish people that live in the village of 500. It must be you. It's always the fucking Romney person who came in on their wagon last week. It's always the other, the minority, the person it's easy to point the finger at.
Yeah.
Is that the only reason? I mean, it certainly seems to have been a reason. When finances became an issue, when the fortunes of the country or the village or whatever start to sour, or when plague or famine happens, that's when the Jews seem to be, thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
So could that be then the explanation?
Well, I mean, let's go to a more modern version of this kind of a thing. Okay. We'll go to an era in Eastern Europe, specifically Russia, but all over Eastern Europe, when the native Eastern European Russian people started to develop some anti-Semitic feeling. Okay. That time would be the Bolshevik Revolution and the Stalin taking over, Lenin taking over and then moving into Stalin. And you look at the terrible things that were being done, and you know who a huge majority of the people doing those terrible things were?
Jewish people. Yeah, that was also kind of an interesting revelation to me.
Yeah, that like 80% of the Bolshevik, like the officers doing the terrible shit, were Jewish people, and that they were doing it as like some kind of Semitic vengeance.
Well, see, that was interesting to me. I didn't quite understand that, but when they talked about, when Darryl Cooper talked about Jewish people being like heavily represented in the class of, was it in the military, the class of people that were like the muscle. I can't remember the details, so I'm sorry, but it wasn't clear to me how that was the case. why were these European countries using Jews in that way?
Because Jewish people are highly involved in like revolutionary activities that always have been throughout history, like going back to the Bible, going back to ancient Rome. And I mean, the reason that the diaspora happened is because E. Michael Jones has this series of books. It's like 3 big ass tomes called The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. And it's all about how it's like part of their DNA.
Let's talk about the diaspora, because I don't really know how it is that the Jews found themselves all over Eastern Europe.
You don't? I feel like we've talked about this before, but
maybe refresh my memory, because I can follow the biblical Jewish timeline up into the 1st century, up until the time when the Romans are crushing the Bar Kokhba revolt and the Maccabean revolt.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it.
That was the cause of the diaspora.
Yeah, so the Romans came over, they conquered, which, not a nice thing to do, but shit happens, man. And I try not to subscribe to might makes right, but one thing that people say is that even if it doesn't make right, might makes,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they had their land conquered. The Romans came in, and the Romans, it's like a lot of these empires, the Ottoman Empire was like this. It's like, you can do what you want. You can run your own affairs. There are certain things you're not going to be allowed to do.
Yep.
But you can have your religion. You can do, live life the way that you've always lived life, but you're paying taxes and you're not having any revolts. And if you have revolts, we're going to fucking smash you. And unless you're stupid, you don't fuck with the Roman Empire at the height of its power, but they did constantly. And they had done it a few times. And then that Bar Kokhba revolt was like the last one. And Rome was like, fuck this. That's when the temple was destroyed. They destroyed most of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And they kicked them all out.
And that
was the birth of modern Judaism, by the way.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I guess the thing that makes that different in my mind is that revolutionary spirit, that example of the Jewish revolutionary spirit, happened in Israel, right?
Yeah.
So but I think the implication that you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the implication that you're giving here is that when the Jews were elsewhere, when they had left their home in Israel and found themselves in Portugal, they had the same revolutionary spirit.
Oh yeah.
And it just breaks out, and it destabilizes.
They constantly find their way to revolutionary movements. They're constantly key players in these revolutionary movements. They're constantly thought leaders in these revolutionary movements, like throughout history.
Okay. So
like a straight line all the way through history.
I want to admit that I didn't, we've already talked about this, but I didn't realize Trotsky was Jewish. So that came as quite a surprise to me.
Yeah.
But that plays into what you're saying.
Old Lev Bronstein, that was his real name.
Lev Bronstein. Yeah. So that plays into what you're saying about Jewish people being thought leaders in revolutionary movements. But what Darryl Cooper said, and you just sort of said as well, that I didn't realize, is that the Jewish people were heavily represented in not just communism, Bolshevism, but also the rise of socialism, and even
anarchism. Go ahead.
Anarchism, yeah. Even to the point where I don't know if I guess it was this the First World War? Maybe it was the First World War. There was a shitload of Jewish people in Germany who enlisted, and where am I going with this?
I don't know. They enlisted
to fight for Germany.
Yeah.
But I might be. There's so much in these podcasts that I might be crossing wires. But
crossing, man.
I don't know if Hitler said no, or if this was in World War I, and I can't remember.
So in World War I, a bunch of it was mostly Germans, obviously they're a minority population, but yeah, they fought in World War I. A lot of them died in World War I. But an interesting aspect of that is towards the end of World War I, at home and amongst the troops out on the front lines, They were spreading a lot. There was this attitude among at home and again on the front lines, this attitude of this war is not good. We shouldn't be out here doing this. And a lot of the people spreading that were Jewish. I mean, at home, it was a lot of there was a huge communist problem in Germany during the war. And a lot of those communists were Jewish people.
Do you think that the woke movement and the BLM movement and some of the things that we've seen in modern American history, that's true for those movements as well?
100. And it's not even a question. You can look into it.
I mean, I never really considered it. I never even asked the question.
Again, this is going to sound, I just want to highlight again that this idea that they run everything and that we're powerless is gay and it's stupid and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But literally pretty much every cultural plague, political plague that is going on in the West, dude, all of them, feminism, all of it. The people who are the thought leaders in this are Jewish people.
I think I'm finally starting to understand. I don't want to say your perspective, but a certain perspective. It's pieces are starting to fall into place for the first time for me. So I'm kind of thinking on the fly.
Sure. Happens.
We've been talking for a while about this. I haven't even got to the main gist of what I wanted to, bitch about. But even before I get in, it's the British. I want to talk about the British. But before I do that, you brought up Mustache Man, and there was one thing that I learned that I wanted to share because I got mixed feelings about it, but I want to just say it.
Let's hear it.
Anyway, for those people who don't know why Mustache Man had a strange, small little mustache.
Oh, yeah. It's good.
Please tell the audience.
So Hitler was a decorated soldier in World War I, like a very brave, decorated soldier. Did a job that people didn't want to do. He was a message runner. So, this was back before radios and stuff like that. So if the people making the decisions back behind the lines needed to communicate something to the people up in the front of the lines, you can't radio to them. So you have to send some guy to go running. And that was what,
to dodge bullets.
That's what Hitler did.
Wow.
And he was a decorated, brave soldier. Got, in the Second World War, Hitler refused to use gas because he was the victim of gas attacks. Okay. And the reason his mustache was like that is because that's how you had to shave your mustache if you wanted to have a mustache to be able to wear a gas mask.
That's it.
And him having his mustache like that during World War II was like a message to the people that war never ended. We're still fighting that war.
So this is exactly what I wanted to say. This is exactly it. So that's it. So I'm picturing Friedrich Nietzsche in my head right now, but in the First World War,
another great mustache.
That's what I mean. In the First World War, people had tremendous mustaches.
Yeah.
Just tremendous curly, bushy fucking mustaches. And when you put your gas mask on, right, you don't get seal around that mustache. Yeah. So Hitler's mustache is this small because that allows him to seal. And you're right. He was a soldier in the First World War. He was a victim of the gas, and he continues to wear that mustache after the war is over in his political career as a message to everybody looking up at him while he's speaking. I was in the fucking shit.
So, Hitler was a propaganda master. I mean, I think he got a lot of it from Goebbels, but he was pretty good at it himself,
Yeah.
And I don't know that he wore the tiny mustache the entire time after the war, but when he came to power, and maybe before,
it was intentional.
He was like, we're doing this. We're gonna send a message.
And there's something about that reminds me.
Send a message with my mustache.
Exactly. It reminds me of the way that Zelensky's outfit.
Oh yeah, he dresses in the olive drab and wears combat boots and shit. Even though he's fucking pathetic. He's not.
But it was clearly a message to everybody seeing it. Look at me. I'm just like one of the soldiers. I'm fighting for the country. I'm in the shit. And this was exactly what Hitler did with wearing that mustache. I think, I don't want to say that's cool, but it's brilliant. It's brilliant that he did that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, this idea that, one day for no reason at all, People just started supporting Hitler. No, Hitler was a genius communicator. Like, people talk about that all the time, his speeches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was more than just his speeches. Like, the guy really knew how to like captivate the people and get them on the same page and things like that. And yeah, the mustache was a part of it for sure.
Do me a favor. I'm going to put you in a weird spot. I'm going to go grab a drink.
Okay.
So I'm going to make you talk to yourself for like 30 seconds. Okay.
Okay. It's just me now. Grab me a bottle of water if you can. So yeah, I just feel like, just to clarify, I think that disavowing is pretty gay. I'm not a big fan of I disavow this, but I don't want it to come off like, I think I think we should adopt, what's the guy's name? Rockwell. I don't think we should have an American Nazi party. I think that Hitler made a bunch of stupid mistakes. And I think that Hitler's ideology was messed up in a lot of ways. But I do think that if we're going to be honest about history, I think that we should take we should look at it differently. We should try to look at it in as honest a terms as possible. And I don't think we do that at all. I think that what we do now is we try to paint Hitler as Mr. Boogeyman, regardless of the truth of the matter. Again, did Hitler do bad things? Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
But I mean, Winston Churchill did bad things. Joseph Stalin did bad things, and we were on Joseph Stalin did a bunch of fucking bad things, and we were on his team. When the Germans were going in to Russia, and they went in during the winter and it fucked them over and all that, when they were pulling back out because they were getting beat, Russians and Ukrainians and Moldovans and all I don't know if Belarus was even a country. I think that might have came after, but all of these people, tons of them, were going up to Hitler and the Nazis and be like, let us come with you.
Oh.
Yeah. So there's a lot to history that we don't, that the narrative is not honest about,
That's super.
So that's just,
that's super important.
Yeah.
And I know the reason, and it's obvious that the reason is like, we have to paint the history black and white. Mm-hmm. It has to be almost a cartoon. There's no nuance. It's almost not even the real story at all. It's so oversimplified that Hitler equals devil.
Yeah.
Allied powers equal world savior.
Yep.
And that's the story.
Yep.
And if you
we're sticking to it.
Yeah, right. If you really allow people to ask the question, if that's the case, why did so many people support Hitler? What did he actually say? What did he want for the country? If you allow people to ask those questions and get answers, you run the risk that somebody's going to say, well, that's not evil. That
makes sense
that
to
makes
me.
sense. Right.
Yeah.
They're afraid that. Go ahead.
I mean, Hitler gets painted as this evil nationalist, right? But the catalyst for this conversation is us talking about Israel-Palestine. And it's just another one of those fucking double standards, man. They're allowed to be nationalist.
Yep.
They're allowed to care about the populations of their country. They're allowed to displace certain groups of people. It's no problem for them. But when it's us, it's a real fucking problem.
Yeah. Do you remember that little bit in the story where Darryl says, I want to say it was Liberia. Was it Liberia? Maybe that wasn't a country yet. Libya? Some country in Africa. I can't remember which one. The Jews were offered a chunk of it for their national homeland, and they said no.
Yeah.
They could have had a national homeland in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That would have been fucking weird. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it was whatever country Idi Amin was in. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember which country that was, but I'm like 99% sure it was whatever country Idi Amin was the big boss of. But I don't know. I think we should probably get it back towards the Israel-Palestine stuff.
Can I talk about the British, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Let's talk about the British.
So re-listening to the series
Yeah.
became very clear to me that the villains in the Israel-Palestine conflict
Yeah.
are the British.
Um,
The villains, listen, you can disagree with me, but my opinion is the British were the villains. And I don't know. I could ramble, but
no, you go ahead. Like expound on your opinion that the British are the villains.
Okay, so it really begins early in the story when Darryl's talking about when he's talking about the mandate government period, right? The British are in control after the Ottoman Empire fell, after the First World War. The British have control over Syria, Palestine. That's what it was called, I think, at the time. And the Arabs living there are swept up in nationalism as much as everybody else around the world is at this time. The Arabs there want to they want self-government, right? Yeah. They want self-government. And they the British say, look, if you help us defeat the Ottomans, so
who they were under the control of. They lived under the Ottoman
400
Empire.
years or something, right?
And they wanted their own government, they wanted their own state, but things weren't really that bad under the Ottomans. It was like pretty fair for them, you know?
Yeah.
And the British swoop in and they're like, hey, you rise up and fight the Ottomans with us, and we'll give you your own state. You'll have self-government.
And even if it wasn't perfect for the Arabs or for the Arab Palestinians under the Ottoman rule, it was the status quo for 400 years. They were used to it.
Yep.
They weren't rocking the boat.
Unlike the Israelite people, the Jewish people under Rome, you know, it's like they had to throw that yoke off. The Arabs were like, it's fine enough, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's just
and it might not be obvious to some people when they think about Turkey being as an Islamic country and you know, Jordan and Syria and all that stuff being Islamic countries. But the truth is the Turks are a different ethnic group and with a different language and a different history. And the Arabs didn't consider themselves brothers with the Turks. I mean, they consider themselves closer kin to the Jews than the Turks.
Yeah, there's an element of like the Turks. They were good with the Turks because the Turks were fair to them, and the kind of part of the reason the Turks were fair to them is because they shared the same religion. They're not the same ethnicity, but they're the same religion. So there's an aspect of why that is that's why things were not that bad, you know, a common ethos.
Yes,
to some extent.
Exactly. But enough reason to not like each other, enough reason to be to other them.
Yeah.
Like if you think about the way the Arabs in the Middle East are with the Persians in Iran, some people think they're Muslims. They're all, you know, they're all the same or whatever. But the truth is they fucking hate each other. They're different types of Muslims. Then they have a different ethnic background with a different language and a different heritage. But the point is the British come in and they say, look, we would rather not send our soldiers after the, you know, this front. We would much rather get you guys to fight for us. How about if you fight for us, we'll make a deal. We'll give you your country that you want.
Yeah.
And they agreed, and they went to fight and die for the British. Meanwhile, the early Zionists are trying to make the argument for a national homeland, and they go to the British. This was the original beginning of political Zionism. Who was the guy now? I can't remember.
Chaim
Weizmann. And he goes to the parliament, and and he makes the deal, and they say, yeah, that the British, who just offered the land to the Arabs for their help in battle, turn around and offer the same land to the Jews. They made a double promise, right? Those fucking guys, because listen, I know, and Darryl Cooper says that they were in a very desperate
World War
situation.
Yeah, it's like bad times.
Yes, it was like life or death. But they promised that land to both the Arabs and the Jews basically simultaneously.
Yeah, not just the Arabs and the Jews, also the French, you know. So yeah, I don't
also the French. Yes,
I don't think that the British are the good guys, you know, and that's like a controversial, like to ask, like if we were talking to like someone like your dad probably, and I said I don't really think that the British were the good guys in World War One, he'd probably be like, "What?"
Right.
I would have too. Less so World War One than World War 2
Mm-hmm.
but to those mean Krauts, but yeah, I don't think that the British were like the good guys for sure. But one thing we started talking about, and we kind of got a little sidetracked, is this idea that Chaim Weizmann saying there's a lot of powerful Jews out there, and if you don't support us, we could make life difficult for you. And you said that was a bluff.
Mm-hmm.
That was not a bluff, dude. Now it may have been like kind of a bluff. Maybe he's playing it up because, like I said, I've said it a couple times. I don't think that they're the supreme rulers of the world, omnipotent. I don't think that.
Yeah.
But I do think you look at man, I cannot remember the guy's name now. Who's that real douchey senator from California?
Gavin Newsom?
No, he's a governor.
Oh, governor, senator.
Schiff.
Okay, yeah.
Jacob Schiff was the guy's name.
Okay.
He was an extremely powerful banker. And so who do you think's really calling the shots in like these giant superpowers in the world? Do you think that so Tim Dillon was just on Tucker Carlson's podcast, and he said, do you really think that the milkman who decided he was going to run for Congress and is a congressman now, do you really think he's calling the shots, or do you think it's the mega billionaires, the oligarchs of the world, the hidden oligarchs in places like America? They're not called oligarchs, but they're basically fucking oligarchs. Who do you think is really calling the shots? Is it those people, or is it, Donald Trump? Yeah.
And I see your point. I think that there are some people who can't be bought, but most people can. And so the oligarchs are pulling the strings.
Yeah. I mean, look into, we're already coming up on 2 hours kind of here, but look into who funded the Russian Revolution during World War One.
Okay.
Like, there were Jewish people who definitely could and definitely did, beyond a shadow of a doubt, exerted great power over the nations involved in these wars.
Yeah.
So the idea that it was a complete bluff is just like factually not true.
So I think the argument that he was making was that like we can't argue that there wasn't wealthy people in the West, Western Europe and America that were providing a lot of money to the Zionist movement, allowing them to buy up a lot of land. There was a lot of political connections involved with all of that. There always is when money is involved. But I think that the Jews of Europe were absolutely devastated after the First and Second World War. I don't think that there were many Jewish people left in Eastern Europe or Russia that had any power or any money or anything.
After World War I?
After the pogroms and the Holocaust and
No, you've said things that contradict that at this point. You said that after World War I, the Cheka, the Bolshevik secret police, like 80% of them were Jewish.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but the Jewish, like, as an obvious example, the Jews that had political power or financial power in Germany weren't there anymore.
Yeah, no.
After the Second World War, they weren't there anymore.
Yeah,
and with all the
no. After the Second World War, yes, they definitely were.
Wealthy, powerful Jews still existing in Germany after the Holocaust.
Well, yeah. Of course, dude.
This is an honest question.
Do you think that the powerful, wealthy Jews were the ones who were in the camps?
I assumed they were right along there with right next to the
poor
people.
They got out.
The ones that got the ones that got out for sure. Yeah, there was that.
Dude, there were I would like to know how many like really powerful Jewish people there were who were in the camps. I don't think it was many.
Yeah.
I think that a big motivation behind the Holocaust was we've got hostages. We have demands. We have things that we want as a nation, and if you don't, give them to us, we got a bunch of hostages. We got a bunch of your kin, and The powerful Jews did not give a fuck.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Some of them did. Some of them during World War II were negotiating before the shit really hit the fan to get them out and get them to Palestine. Yeah. And this is a thing that people don't really tell you, but Hitler was open to that. He was like, "Yeah, dude, take them, get them out of here."
That's another thing to mention. Darryl Cooper talks about this, that Hitler made an offer to all of the world leaders saying, we've got all these Jews here. We don't want them here.
Yeah.
If you'll take them, we'll send them to you. And all of the compassionate, liberal Western countries, America included, refused.
Yep, rejected them.
We don't want any of them, they said.
Yeah.
That is amazing. It's like, and fair enough. So their fate is sealed. You could stop it. Anybody, the Brits, the Americans, the French, you could stop it. And they just went, nope.
Yeah. They were crying for them, in the press. Oh, the poor Jews, and Hitler like roasted them for it. Like he would make speeches and be like, oh, we're so compassionate, but you don't want them,
That's crazy. I had no idea. I'm not done tearing up the Brits though.
Yeah.
There's a couple more things that they did.
Yeah, they did a bunch of bad stuff. So the first thing that you were talking about, so there's the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which is the agreement between the British and the French that the French could have like Syria things like that. Then there's the Balfour Declaration, which is the agreement between the Jewish people, the Zionists and the British government that said that they would be able to have their own, at least a territory.
Yes. Yep.
But a state is like very explicitly what the Zionists were going after.
Yep.
And there may have been a name for the agreement between the British and the Arabs, but if there was, I can't recall it. Yeah. So, but what else? What else you got?
Well, when the British had the mandate government in Palestine, they had policies in place. If they had to hire people to do jobs, whatever it might be, whatever it is, whatever that the British government or military needed help with, they would pay the locals to do. And they, as a matter of policy, paid Jewish workers 30% more than Arabs.
Yeah.
As a matter of policy.
So they would hire Arab people, and there were like I said, there was different branches of Zionism, political, evolutionary, and one of the other ones was labor Zionism.
Labor, yeah.
And that was like the Ben-Gurion faction. And so they would say no hiring Arabs. Like they would get mad at the ones who were even hiring them for 30% less. Like, no hiring these Arabs. We got to get them out of here. One way we can do that is depriving them of income, depriving them of a livelihood.
Right.
And so the Zionists in Palestine would petition the British government, we need more people. We need to be able to do more immigration, because eventually the Arabs are like, this is becoming a problem. This immigration is becoming a problem. We need to put a cap on this. And that's the thing, man. You're saying that the British are the bad guys in this, but the British, while they are the bad guys in a lot of ways, they also did try to help the Arabs out. They were trying to make sure that there could be a two-state kind of a solution, or a state where the Arabs didn't have to be second-class citizens. And the Zionists just flat fucking refused.
Yeah.
No, this is not happening.
That's true.
And it's interesting because now that's what they're doing. The Arabs want to have rights, and they're like, no, it's just, it's more of the double standards, always double standards for the Zionists.
Yeah. Well, so there are Arab citizens of Israel, and they're they have representation in government in Israel. So that's something.
Yeah, that's something.
But the thing about the British is they were trying to preserve something for the Arabs. They were trying to make a compromise. But the only reason I see that they were trying to make a compromise is because they promised the land to both people. They put themselves in a fucking position where they couldn't fulfill either promise. So they're trying to compromise.
Why couldn't they?
Why couldn't they what?
Why couldn't they fulfill both promises? Who was that on?
Well,
Who was the group that was making it really, really hard for the Brits to fulfill both promises?
Well,
it was mainly one side.
But you can't fulfill both promises. The land was offered to two people, so
but they could have fulfilled both promises in some way had both sides been willing to work together. And there was one side that was not willing to work together at all.
You're right.
The Arabs were. The Arabs in the beginning were like, yeah, they can come, and as the Zionists built up more and more of a population, they started drawing more and more of a hardline stance.
See, that's another interesting thing that people don't know. I didn't know is that the Arabs were one of the only people in the world that were welcoming Jewish refugees.
Yeah,
and like I said, when America wouldn't take a single Jew, the Arabs were like, bring our cousins, our cousins can live with us. I think that
cousins, I don't know.
I think that the hatred between the Jews and the Arabs, the perception that people have today doesn't allow for that fact. It doesn't allow for the fact that after the First World War, not that long ago.
Yeah.
So the Jews were welcomed into Palestine.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely truth in that. The double standard that I'm getting at is when the Zionists were in a minority, okay, they were drawing a hardline stance. Even if it wasn't coming right out and saying this, in the beginning when they didn't have the numbers, they were, sneaky about it, which you're not allowed to say that they're sneaky because then you're an anti-Semite. But
well, they were.
They fucking were.
They were. They were playing 4D chess.
So they could draw this hard line as a minority and be like, we want rights. We want to have a state. We want this. We want that. And now that the roles are reversed and Hamas and the Palestinians are a minority and they're saying, we're not negotiating, just like the Zionists did back then in the 20s and 30s. And just the exact same way, the Arabs are not allowed to do that. That's a real problem. We're going to, look at what's going on in Palestine right now. It's a real problem when other people do the things that the Zionists do.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
All the way across the board, all kinds of things.
Do you remember Darryl Cooper saying that when the Arabs started to, I don't know if it was I think it was Arabs, when the Arabs started to put booby traps down for the British because because after a while they realized the British weren't going to keep their promise and they basically turned on the British when they would put bombs down. And a British convoy would get blown up.
Yeah.
That what they would do is they would force the Arabs to drive over the rest of the bombs. They would literally force them at gunpoint to drive over the rest of them. So the incentive for not putting bombs down that are going to hurt them is if you do it to us, we're going to make you walk on your own landmines. That's fucking gnarly, man. The British did that.
Yeah.
They also remember he said that they were like randomly demolishing Arab homes. They would just randomly demolish them. The British would force the family to detonate the dynamite, to be the one to blow up their own home. Yeah. They would force the man of the house or whatever to blow up his own home. And then they would make them clean up the mess. Then the British government would send them a bill for the cost of demolishing their house.
Yeah.
The British were fucking the villains of that story, man. Sorry, go ahead.
The British were the villains of the story, but why were the British doing all this stuff? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Why did the British time and time again do these things to the Arabs and not the Zionists?
Well, it's pretty clear in the story that once Chaim Weizmann gets the ear of the British Parliament, everything policy-wise, everything changes in favor of the Jews. That goes back to paying the Jews 30% more than Arabs for labor. That's part of that whole policy.
Yeah.
So to me, that makes the British more villains. Even if they were persuaded politically by Chaim Weizmann, the British were that as a matter of policy.
Yes, 100%. I'm with you. The British are not good. I've said that from the outset.
Why don't the Arabs hate the British more today? Like, do they hate them like they hate us? I don't mean us.
I mean
the
America. West. Yeah. I mean, America's the hegemon at this point. We are the people who are, well, less and less every fucking day. But So I think it's natural that they are directing it towards us at this point, because England's a fucking joke. Great Britain's a fucking joke at this point.
Yeah.
Sorry to any of the Brits who are listening, but hopefully you come back.
Shout out to Daniel Torden.
Yeah. But again, yeah, I think that the British people did a bunch of bad, stupid things. But why? At whose behest?
Yeah.
And I just don't think that you can give all of the blame to the British people. You can give them a bunch of it for sure. But
do you think,
again, this idea that the Zionist influence over these powers was a bluff is obviously not true. It's like very obviously not true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the facts. I'm just.
But you do. You listen to the podcast.
Yeah, twice.
So you do. You know that all of this bad stuff happened, and it's like, why did it only happen in one direction for the most part? And eventually, when the Brits started saying, "Okay, this is getting a little out of hand. This is getting bad. We're doing some bad, stupid things," the fucking Zionists turn on the British.
That part of the story was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's like we think about Hamas and Al Qaeda and ISIS and all of these people as mean, evil terrorists, but the people who founded the state of Israel were mean, evil terrorists. Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there's no way to parse the two.
Now, do you think, I guess I kind of think that's true with Ben Gurion and some of those later groups, but do you think that was true of the political Zionists in the beginning?
No, I don't think that they were terrorists. I think that they were like, so do you know, like the fox and the lion versions of governing? It's like some leaders, like Hitler was a lion, Okay. A lot of modern Western, they're foxes,
Sly and
yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
And they did a lot of like fox shit. You know what I'm saying? They were, maneuvering behind the scenes. But as soon as they got to a point where they could start doing terrorist shit, they started doing terrorist shit.
You're right.
And I have there's a branch of the Zionists that, while I disagree with the things that they were doing, I kind of have respect for them. Again, this harkens back to the double standards that I'm talking about. They're allowed to do all this shit. They're allowed to think all this shit. But if I say it, I'm evil. I'm a racist. I'm an anti-Semite. But people like Zev Jabotinsky, Menachem Begin, Joseph Trumpeldor, they were lions. You know what I mean? Like, they were out and they were like, we're gonna do terrorist shit. You know what I mean? Not advocating for terrorist shit, but I think that there's a lot that I do almost admire about the Zionists, and I wish. My problem is that we're not allowed to feel that way. They're allowed to feel that way.
Yeah.
But if I feel that way, again, I'm all of these mean words.
Yeah. You remember a couple different times we talked about this weird, I don't know if it's weird, but this the way that my personality is, where I feel like the people who don't follow the rules, they piss me off. It's like, just play the same game everyone else is playing and succeed or fail on your own merits. Don't try to wiggle around the rules. And I get really pissed about that because I feel like that it's a kind of a cancer to the system. It's a cancer to society. It's a cancer to the order, the natural order of what human beings have worked out. I don't know if I'm ranting right now, but hopefully you understand the point I'm trying to make. Like, the people that break the rules are pieces of shit, and I don't like that. But then like my brother will push back and say, look, if you have to break the rules to win, then breaking the rules is just fine. It's like, the example of the guerrilla warfare that the Americans did during the Revolution. It wasn't noble. It was considered, it was against the rules of combat, what we were doing, but we had to, the only way we could win.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because the sly things that the Jewish Zionists did in the early days absolutely included things like smuggling people into the country,
Smuggling weapons in.
After they agreed to limit immigration and all that, they still smuggled people in every which way they could. And when that finally stopped, then they proceeded to buy land up as much as they could. And it was like after the Great Depression, like in 1929 stock market crash, people were destitute, and the Jewish what's it called, the trust, the Jewish National Trust or whatever it's called. Yeah. Those people were going in and buying up Arab land for they were getting it for a steal because these people couldn't feed their kids. It was absolutely terrible. They were taking advantage of people in order to acquire all this land.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they did all of that legally, above board, without bloodshed. It's like, do you admire that? Is there some part of you that, like, if it were you, if you were in this state of mind where you thought, we're being hunted all over the world, we can't protect ourselves because we're spread out, we need a homeland, let's go back to our ancestral homeland, let's be together, let's protect each other, and we'll, by any means necessary, then you outthink the British and you outthink the powers that be, and you figure out a way.
Lie, cheat, and steal. Right.
Is there something about that strikes you as admirable?
Yes and no. Look, a lot of the stuff that you were just talking about there are parallels to what's going on now, like you were talking about the buying of the land and things like that. Do you know how many foreign nationals own American land?
I know the Chinese own a lot of land.
Tons of it. Like, it could be a real problem. Apparently New York City, like a lot of it is uninhabited because a ton of it is just owned by like Russian oligarchs, Chinese oligarchs. It could be a real problem. Now when it becomes a problem for us, I'm like 100%, let's do what we have to win. Like 100%, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
But I think that when you live in a high trust society, that kind of rule breaking is abhorrent, and I think we should crush it with an iron fist.
Yeah.
But when you don't live in a high trust society, it becomes necessary. And so, yeah, I understand the motivations of the Zionists to do what they had to get Israel. But my problem is, this is our country, like America is America. We are Americans, and there's no fucking debating it. It's our country, you know? So when it comes to that point for us, if, knock on wood, I hope that it doesn't. But if it were to, I would not feel any kind of moral, I wouldn't feel bad morally about lying, cheating, and stealing to some degree,
Yeah.
But that is not the case for the Zionists, you can say that they were entitled to that land because it was their ancestral homeland, but I don't know. It's like, we don't have a whole lot of time to get into it, but I don't think that they can make that case. I don't know. Dude, these, what's Benjamin Netanyahu? You know where he was born? Poland.
I was going to say Poland.
A lot of these people were born in Poland, and a lot of them, you know what the group of Jewish people who are from Eastern Europe are called, right? The Ashkenazi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the Ashkenazi, when you can find like people who have been Jewish in Palestine for the thousands of years, the people who have been there, you know how much genetically they have in common?
That's a good question.
Not very much.
Yeah.
Do you know about the Khazarian Empire?
No.
Yeah, well, that's something you should look into.
Yeah, what is it?
It's a group of people who were like, traders in, kind of like the Eastern Europe, Turkey area. I'm having a hard time with the date, but it's after, it's obviously after they got kicked out of Rome. The Jews got kicked out of Rome, and they're doing the diaspora thing, and they go into the Khazarian Empire, and the Khazarians eventually take over or take up Judaism as their religion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a lot of these people who are saying it's our ancestral homeland, no, it's not. You're more Khazarian, you're more Eastern European, you're more Turkish than you are Jewish people.
Yeah.
You have like nothing, very, very little genetically in common with like Jesus Jews.
Yeah.
You have almost nothing in common with them.
And nothing in common culturally.
And so the Arabs who welcomed them at first are seeing this
white people.
Yeah, white
That's
people.
what it looked like
European
to them.
white people.
Yep.
So
it's interesting.
I don't think that they have much of a claim to it. And I think that, it's almost like what people say we did with the Indians, but it's a lot different because we came here and did we fuck the Indians up? Yeah, we did fuck the Indians up. And I don't really feel bad about it because this is a big fucking country, and when we came, they were not, some of them were welcoming towards us for sure, but not all of them. It's not like they were, nice Indians smoking the peace pipe and offering, like a lot of them were savage warriors and they didn't fucking want us here.
Yep.
And we exerted our will. Might makes, that is not really the case with these Khazarian Eastern European people coming to Palestine. It's a pretty fucking small area, and these people have been there for thousands of years, and you're like, get the fuck out.
Dude, that's really interesting, that Khazarian thing. I have to bone up on that.
Interesting.
Because if it's the case that maybe you had a little bit of minor intermarriage with the Palestinian or the original Hebrew Jews coming out of the diaspora with this Khazarian people, and maybe there's a tiny bit of that in the mix, but otherwise
it's very little, dude, because it's not so much a product of intermarrying and interbreeding and things like that. It's a product of the Khazarians took on the religion.
Yeah.
So like the Ottoman Empire, who they had that relationship with the Muslims because the Turks took on Islam. It's like that. It's like they're not really Arabs. They're Turks, and they have Islam.
Yep.
The Khazarians were like the Ottoman Empire.
Interesting.
Like they took on Judaism. They were not ethnically Jewish.
Yeah.
And a lot of these modern Jews, the Ashkenazim, they're Khazarian.
That's really interesting. So I know we're right up on it.
This is gonna get this episode is gonna get us canceled. We're gonna get kicked off of YouTube. We might seriously want to clip this off and put it on Rumble. Okay. We'll upload it. It'll
go to Rumble anyway. So I'll put it on Rumble.
Yeah, but we might have to clip it out of YouTube. Is my point.
Okay.
Like, again, more conspiracy things about.
This is strictly commentary on a fucking other podcast. Leave us alone, YouTube.
Yeah.
Hold on. There's one other thing I want to mention that stood out. Just so I know I was going to be bouncing around, but you brought up Zeb. What's his name?
Jabotinsky.
Is that the guy that his name means wolf?
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing that I just wanted to add that stuck out to me was what happened towards the end of the story when the Jews turned on the British because they were no longer really cooperating with them. And that was another story I meant to tell, but anyway. And there started to be skirmishes between Israel. They weren't Israelis yet, but you know what I mean. The Jewish people moving into Palestine,
the Zionists,
and the Brits, and it was like a lot of guerrilla warfare type situations. And there was one story he tells where the British have outlawed a certain type of punishment. It was whipping. It was like whipping somebody for a crime. Mm-hmm. They had outlawed that. But because of the state of the world and what was happening, they decided for the protectorate, they would remove that ban so they could whip people again. And they had captured some of these Zionists that were doing these attacks, and they were going to whip them. And Zeb Jabotinsky sends a message to the British saying, if you whip any of our Jewish people, we're going to basically get you back, twice over.
Yeah. And
they whipped them.
Yeah.
And those fucking guys.
Was that the catalyst for the King David Hotel?
Yeah, leading up to it. Yeah. Yeah. Those guys went out and found officers that were like dining at a restaurant, ripped them out, threw them in the back of a van, took them somewhere, stripped them down, whipped them publicly, and left them there for the British to find. And every time the British tried to retaliate one way or another, Zeb sends the same message to them. If you do that to us, we're going to do it to you twice over.
Yeah.
And every time they did. And the British eventually were like, fuck this. And they backed down. The greatest empire in the world backed down. Yeah. And I thought that was.
So I think that might be one way in which I think that the British are bad guys, to be perfectly honest with you. It's like, if you're going to be this big, bad fucking empire, then be it, man. Don't, put boots on the ground. Do like run your shit if you're going to do it, But, I said that that branch of Zionism, the Zeb Jabotinsky, Menachem Begin types, that's what I admire about them. Now, in terms of like doing that kind of stuff, again, I'm not advocating for that kind of stuff. I don't think that we're anywhere near the point where we need to be doing that kind of stuff, but it might come someday. But that fierce pride in your people,
Yeah,
I respect that. And it fucking irritates me that Zeb Jabotinsky and Menachem Begin and, there was a group, it was like a militia group called the Haganah that Ben Gurion was a big part of. And these like right-wing militant people split off from it. Menachem Begin, particularly, they formed another group called the Irgun, and they were like hardcore terrorists,
Yeah.
And the motivation for doing this was that they loved their people and their culture, and they wanted their own land, and they wanted to protect what was theirs. I admire that.
Yeah.
And I resent the fact that I'm not allowed to feel that way.
Yeah.
That's a real fucking problem for me.
I understand that.
That's why the double standards and the shit like that are why, yes, the British are the bad guys, but the British are not the only bad guys in that story.
Yeah.
And I think that in some ways you could say the Arabs were the bad guys at times. But again, and I think that this is relevant for what's going on in Israel-Palestine today. What the fuck else are they supposed to do?
Who?
The Arabs, the Palestinians. What the fuck else are they supposed to do? They're up against this state that can make their life miserable and has been making their life miserable, and they can't really do anything about it because this state that's making them miserable says you have no political rights. You don't have shit. And, they pay lip service to it by, we were talking earlier about there are Palestinian representatives in the government, but give me a fucking break. It's like, we just trust that everything that the government does is legit and it's not a show. And, it's not like, some like worthless thing that's thrown to them. Like, look, oh, come on. You've got this guy. I don't know his name, but you've got this guy in the Knesset, which is like their
parliament.
Yeah, exactly. It's bullshit, man. And one thing that Darryl talked about is like how good the Zionists were at propaganda compared to the Arabs. And he said that if you have to start your argument off with, well, I don't condone terrorism, but then you've won the war already, and I hate to say it, I don't condone terrorism, but I almost like want to not say that. It's like, what the fuck else do you expect them to do?
Yeah, man. And then maybe we can end on this since we're kind of at time. We were talking about, trying to remember who it wasn't specifically, with all those names get all muddled.
I got a good mind for names. So you tell me what the thing is and I might be able to come up with it.
Was it the Aragoon guy or was it the, what's the gang called? There was another smaller militia called the something gang.
Oh, the Stern gang. I believe that the Irgun and the Stern gang are the same thing. It may be a different one, but yeah, they're another like militant militia group.
So whichever it was, Dan Carlin, Darryl Cooper was talking about all the terrorist strategies that they developed during that time, and they said against the British primarily. They said the cookbook for Islamic terrorism today, all of the things that they do, except for suicide bombers, the model were the Zionists.
Oh yeah,
they learned all of that from the Zionists.
Yep, they were good, man. And it's crazy that Menachem Begin, who was like basically the leader of Irgun, he was like the second prime minister. I mean, the Haganah, which Irgun split from, was run by Ben Gurion. You know, it's like these guys who were terrorist leaders ended up being the leaders of a state that was recognized on the world stage. And it's just not a problem, you know? And dude, we could do a whole nother episode about this because we talked about Chaim Weitzman and the political Zionists and the bluff of them having influence over. Well, look at our government, dude. Look at how influential IPAC, the Israeli Political Action Committee, is in the United States. There is zero chance in hell. So I'm going to like take up a little bit of a Zeb Jabotinsky position here.
Do it.
Zero chance in hell that in a modern nation, you should be allowed to be a dual citizen and be involved in our government. Not going to happen. If I'm in control, if in like my fantasy world, you pick, and if you don't refuse to pick, go live there.
Yeah.
And we're revoking your citizenship from this country, and fuck you.
So that whole divided loyalties thing, I even remember hearing about that with John F. Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
Because people were afraid to elect a Catholic because they thought the Pope might be able to pull the strings.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. But yeah, dude, you should look up how many Zionists are in our government, and you can like pretend that they don't have influence if you want. Not you, but you. I mean, you know, whoever.
Yeah.
You can pretend that they don't have influence, but it's a crock of shit. And I feel like these people know that it's a crock of shit, so they just don't talk about it. And if you talk about it, you're an anti-Semite. Yeah, the idea that you can be a dual citizen to another country and be a senator, a congressperson, any of that shit, no. And I would go so far as to say, you can't be a citizen of this country if you're a citizen of another country. I have no problem with that. And if you refuse to denounce your citizenship from that other country, you have to go live there. You're not welcome here. I don't understand how that is controversial at all.
No, I get you, man.
Do you think that it is? Do you think that we should allow people to be dual citizens?
I see the argument better if you're in elected or appointed office, if you're in politics. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a risk for sure.
Well, think about people, you know, we talked about them being in positions of, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Overrepresented in positions of power. Okay. So what are those positions of power? It's things like government. It's things like banking. So we're talking about government, but do you think a person who is a dual citizen should be able to be pulling the strings? Do you think that a person who is in a dual citizen should be able to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve, which is not a government position, by the way?
Yeah, I think that's a risk.
Do you think that they should be in positions of running propaganda in the form of our media?
No.
Think about someone like Ben Shapiro. Think about the influence that Ben Shapiro has over the typical boomer in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole with Ben. I think Ben is a stand-up guy. I think he speaks for himself. You know, he says this is what I think.
No, he speaks for Israel.
Well, maybe so, but he doesn't seem to there's a word for it. He's not what's the word? He doesn't seem like he's trying to get me to he's not trying to persuade me. He's trying to
What?
No, he's making an argument if he's arguing with somebody else, but I don't feel like Ben is pushy with he's trying to push it on me. I don't feel that way.
He's just better. He's just more effective at it than I think. Do you think that I, in this podcast, have been trying to persuade people?
No,
I have.
I think you've been expressing your thoughts and opinions, and
I'm expressing them so that people will hear them and be like, oh shit, yeah, maybe that's right. I 100%, I want to influence people. I want to persuade people.
I understand.
And if you don't think Ben Shapiro's doing that, you're smoking fucking crack.
I think Ben Shapiro is making money as a talking head, and what he's selling is his opinion and his brand. And
what is his opinion?
Well, I mean, I don't follow Ben very closely, but he's a very conservative and very religious guy, and he sells a traditional family and traditional worldview, which is something that I think you can appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate some of the stuff that Ben Shapiro says, but I also think that, you know, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if the flies that you're trying to catch are the conservative ones, that's why I brought up, what kind of an influence do you think that Ben Shapiro has on the typical boomer in this country who is like, this country's a mess, you know? Yeah, it's like they hear Ben Shapiro talk about, you know, all the woke stuff and how it's retarded.
Yeah.
And they're like, I like this guy. And then he says, we have to support Israel. It's un-American. He says shit like that, dude. It's un-American to not support Israel.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
He's running propaganda for Israel. It's Dennis Prager, all of these people, they're running propaganda for Israel.
You think that is explicit and intentional, or do you think that is
100%?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care. I guess, if it's deliberate or if it's incidental.
How would it be incidental?
Like, Ben is Jewish, and so the idea that he loves and supports Jewish people, and that might extend to some sort of affinity with the state of Israel, and like, it just seems like it's all connected. You know, it's like it's part of the culture somehow. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that it is part of Jewish culture to support Israel at the expense of your host nation. Yeah, I think that that's kind of a Jewish cultural thing.
You think at the expense of your host nation?
100%.
Yeah.
Not all of them. You know, again, I think that the Delhi Jews, I don't think that
Ben
they're...
Shapiro?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think Ben Shapiro loves America?
No.
So I would assume he does. You know, I would assume he does.
I think that he loves America for what it can do for Israel.
If that's true, it's dark, man.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think that I think that Ben Shapiro is definitely more in the bag for Israel than he is for the United States. I don't even really think that that's controversial.
Boy, I like the Daily Wire, so it's hard for me to.
I like some parts of the Daily Wire. I thought Candace was pretty badass when she was there.
I think
I like Knowles.
It's a very necessary counter position to what you don't. There's not much of it out there, you know.
Yeah, I don't. I think that the Daily Wire at large, I think, is probably a net negative, to be honest with you, because they do what I was just talking about. They like whip all the boomers up into, we're right wing. And then you get a person who's really right wing and really cares about America and Americans. And the Daily Wire says, you're an anti-Semite.
Who are you speaking
Nick
about?
Fuentes, you know, like, I don't love Nick Fuentes. I think he's kind of, I think that Nick Fuentes kind of does some of the same things. Like, he attacks people who were, in my mind, more allies than they are enemies. And Nick just like lashes out at people. But I do think that part of that is because he's had a hard run of it. Like, he doesn't know who the fuck to trust. I have sympathy for Nick Fuentes. But yeah, no, lots of right-wing people who are like further to the right than the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire gatekeeps and tells their boomer idiot audience, this guy's bad.
I think that you're right.
Like Zeb Jabotinsky, American Zeb Jabotinsky's, the Daily Wire is like, that's a bad person.
I think you're right that especially Ben Shapiro, but that the Daily Wire assumes, as a part of the conservative package, support for Israel is a part of that. And the question you're bringing up is, why in the world should that be the case? You know what I mean? How does that fit in the puzzle piece? If I'm a conservative and that means a few things, why does one of those things mean support for Israel? I think that's a valid.
You said, when I said that Ben Shapiro loves America for what it can do for Israel, when you are a part of America, if you are loyal to Israel, okay, if you are not a dual citizen, you are born in Israel and you're an Israeli citizen and you love Israel, does it not make sense to love America for what America can do for Israel?
Sure.
It makes perfect sense,
Sure.
right? So why can Ben Shapiro, why is it dark for Ben Shapiro to feel that way? Because Ben Shapiro is ostensibly a fucking American. And Ben Shapiro if Ben on the fucking off chance that Ben Shapiro listens to this episode, Ben Shapiro would call me an anti-Semite.
Yeah, for sure.
Without question.
For sure he would.
So why is it wrong for me as an American to care about Israel? What the fuck does Israel do for us? Pick your brain on that one.
I assume we're a trading partner and a military strategic partner. I don't know what else they do for us.
I think that those things that you just mentioned, maybe to some extent, but not enough to make it fucking worth it, man. They don't do, in my mind, we do a whole lot more for them than they do for us. And again, we can do a whole nother episode.
Yeah, and I think we should, because that extends far beyond the government.
Oh yeah,
because we could talk about the evangelical little old ladies and all the money.
Oh yeah,
all the money.
Christian Zionists.
Christian Zionists. Let's do an episode on Christian Zionists.
Well, yeah.
All right, listen, man. It's 150 degrees in his office now, so
it is fucking hot.
On that note, I'll cue the music. Oop.